Welcome to the Nightly Rant. I'm Mike.
And I'm Torya.
This is the show where we talk about the awful things that have happened in our day, the awesome things that have happened in our day,
and all the things in between.
Thanks for listening, and we truly hope you enjoy.
That is stupid.
Do you miss the glory days of talk radio, where the hosts knew their stuff and were not spreading fake stories? What would it be like if those same hosts could speak their mind and not have to answer to management for it? I have just the thing for you. Spencer Hughes Podcast Adventures is the new show from Spencer Hughes, formerly of Fox News Radio and a host of other places. For as little as $1 a month, you can have access to Spencer again. His insights will make you think, and his humor will make you laugh. This is your chance to help a man build his dream and support his family. Head over to patreon.com/Spencer Hughes today and subscribe to one of the several levels you can choose from. You will not be disappointed in the content you are going to begin receiving. Patreon.com/Spencer Hughes. Adventurous content, the way radio used to be.
You qualify for it, you get it.
Okay.
Whereas minimum wage is, we're going to pay you $10 an hour, but you still got to work 10 hours to make $100.
So essentially, with this universal basic income, person A could be a doctor and work 100 million hours of their life, and person B could be a bum and work no hours of their life. And I don't mean homeless person when I say bum. I mean somebody who's choosing not to work any of the hours and get the same income.
It's not about the same income. No. Like, here's a paragraph about it. It says an unconditional income that is sufficient to meet a person's basic needs at or above the poverty line is called full basic income, while if it is less than that amount, it is called partial. So the idea is that they give you some form of guaranteed minimum income.
That you don't have to work for? Or
you don't have to work for at all. You're guaranteed that money.
Where does the money come from?
Your taxes, obviously.
So do you pay taxes on your universal basic income then?
I'm sure you would. So you're paying taxes on the tax dollars.
And so if you had this universal basic income and then you got a $10 an hour minimum wage job, you'd get the $10 an hour minimum wage job.
Well, it would depend. No, not on top of. You would not get anything extra until you were making more than the universal basic income level amount.
So if it was, some point, let's say it was, no longer get.
Let's say it was $200 a week.
Okay.
And you got a job at $10 an hour, working 10 hours. That's only $100 a week. They're not going to give you the universal basic income plus your $100.
But you'd
what
get
they're going to do is
basic income.
They're going to just $100. Exactly. They're just going to give you $100 basic income.
Okay.
And the reality is, it's not a dollar for dollar thing, because just like unemployment, okay, if you make $250 a week on unemployment, and you go out and you do a job for $250, that doesn't necessarily mean you only cancel out $250 of the overall debt. Each piece isn't necessarily worth 1/4, 1/4, 1/4.
Okay.
It could be like, 50%, 25, 25.
Okay.
And what happens with unemployment is you get to a number that's far lower than your actual unemployment income. So like you might make, what did I say, $300 a week? That would be $1,200 a month, essentially, right? I mean, if you just keep it simple. So $1,200 a month, you would have to get a job making maybe up to $800 a month, and it cancels out your $1,200 a month.
So
completely.
So you make less than that's stupid.
That's how unemployment works. That's what I'm saying. The universal basic income isn't going to work that way.
It would be dollar for dollar.
It'll be dollar for dollar. Okay. And when you bypass it, and if you make, what it's basically saying is you need this much money in order to survive.
So essentially, universal basic income replaces both minimum wage and welfare.
Well, no, it doesn't replace minimum wage, because you could still say for jobs, the minimum you can pay is $14 an hour.
But it
That's
should
minimum
replace
wage.
minimum wage, because if you ever wanted to stop getting said universal basic income and earn more money, then you'd strive for a higher level job. So technically you could replace minimum wage, but they didn't just not have minimum wage anymore when you had universal basic income.
Yes, you could do away with it, because socially it would no longer be an issue.
Right. Because
if all you can find is a job making $4 an hour, well, that's okay, because you're already given the money you need in order to survive.
Well, and then I would guess that jobs paying $4 an hour would go back to being more for like teenagers and stuff who aren't getting universal basic income
Exactly.
yet, and who...
It would change the workforce dynamic a lot.
Yeah.
It would change it back to more what it was like. Like,
back to a more reasonable way.
When I was maybe a little younger than you, or I don't know, maybe about your age.
So 800 years ago.
You go to McDonald's or Burger King, and there were high school kids working behind the counter.
And maybe the odd, like, older person.
Yeah, but even the freaking manager, it's not... When you watch, like, Fast Times at Ridgemont High and her brother is managing the fast food restaurant, that's not fake. That happens.
It was for, like, college students would be the managers, and high school students would be the workers.
Exactly. And it's just... So anyway, the point being that you're right. I hadn't thought about it that way. It could ultimately lead to the demise of minimum wage, because the government could safely say, look...
Well, it essentially should lead to the demise of minimum wage, is what I meant.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And wouldn't it also replace Social Security? Because...
Well, yeah, because you're already getting the money. Yeah.
You'd retire from your job, and if you were getting a pension from your job, that would replace some of your universal basic income, but you'd be guaranteed living money.
Yeah, but if you got to think about this. Let's say you're... Just for sake of round numbers, let's say your universal basic income is $300. It's all you need in a month to live. We obviously know that's bullshit.
But it's a nice
There's no way that
number.
could happen. It's an even small number that most brains can handle. And then you work at this job, 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 and you actually get $1,100 a week from that job. Well, you don't get any universal basic income. It's gone. And you get your income.
Mm-hmm.
Then you decide you would like to retire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're going to have a pension. If the pension is more than the universal basic income, pension pays.
That's what I said.
So in a sense, what it does when you think about it, and I hadn't really thought about it this way, that comment really triggered me to think deeper about this issue. And when you think about it, it's a kind of a neat compromise between a little too social heavy programs in a government versus a libertarian style of let the private sector handle it.
I was going to say, I now kind of understand why it's a libertarian thing to do, because it's taking 2 and maybe a third social service, and I put that in quotation marks because minimum wage isn't really a social service.
Right.
But it's taking those 3 things and kind of rolling them up into one program monitored by one area of the government. And if it's a universal basic living wage, basic income.
When we just went through that analysis, what it made me realize is there's more times that the private sector is where the money's coming from than there are times where it's coming from the public sector. Right. Because what ends up happening is, you get out of high school and you're going to college. That's when you qualify for universal basic income, because you're now an adult.
Would basically, why would it even have to wait until you're out of college? Wouldn't it technically start when you're an adult at 18?
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Well,
so
not when you get out of college, when you go into college.
You'd be getting your basic income while you're in college.
Right there, while you're in college.
Which is amazing.
And you can build up the money. You can pay for a lot of your bills and whatever that you have, right? So you don't go into as much debt. Then, watch this. Then you come out of college and they say to you, I'm sorry, but, $10 an hour is what we pay people with your degree just getting out of school.
And it would...
I'm sorry.
That's another spot where it would eliminate the, every single job saying you need to have experience to work there as well.
Because they can offer whatever they want, and if someone accepts it, hey, that's okay.
If they want to hire a $5 an hour intern, they can, and then pay them $45 an hour.
And that's
2
the
years
key.
down the road when they're worth it.
And that's the key, though, because like using that 300 number again, if you are making $300 universal basic income every week, and the new company offered you $100 universal basic income, but you thought that you could go do that job for 6 months and learn so much that you could jump up to an $1,100 a week income, you'd go do it, because guess what? You're never going to get less than the $300. But let's remember to point this out. Now it's coming from the public sector, right?
Right.
But then you go and get the job for $1,100. Now guess what happens? Now it's coming from the private sector. And guess what? If you set it up correctly, from that point forward, once the private sector kicks in, no more need for the public sector. Now guess what happens when that happens? You're still being required to pay into that system.
Right.
So the private sector handles the business side of it. You're making payments. Private sector's taking less money for it. So some of the money goes to the government from you that you're not using. You're now permanently in the private sector. But the people who are still in the public sector, they've got extra money to throw at them to move them over to the private sector. And that was almost the goal of the government, is to take you right out of college, like get you out of high school, get you used to this income, and then shift you over to private sector funding. Once you're in private sector funding, all that money you're paying in, it's theirs. They own it.
So essentially, the people who'd be exclusively getting universal basic income would be like college students, people who can't work, and people who no longer work.
Right.
Like retired people. And then there'd be the transition phase.
And there's a certain percentage of those retired people
getting partial income.
Well, and there's exactly, and there's a certain percentage of those people that won't touch the universal basic income
I didn't mean
at all, because they'll make. So you've got a possibility of paying 100% out, but it's going to be more likely the max you'll pay out is 10%.
Well, just like all college age students won't need it, because some of them will go straight into a job where they're making that much money. Anyway.
Exactly. And that's the point. That's what I said. I noticed the beauty of the system, because on the one hand, it's kind of a welfare system. When you think about it, that's what it is. Everybody's going on welfare.
When you first say it, it sounds like communism.
And well, it does, but I think the key differentiation is the ability to make more money than what that income is. It isn't hey, everybody, you throw your money into a giant pool. It's, hey, Victoria, you throw your money that you earn into your pool.
Well, because let's be real, that's why communism doesn't work, is because it removes the
incentive to work.
Yeah.
But see, by doing it this way, if you're not satisfied with $800 a week, then get to work and earn more.
Right.
And if you want to double how much money you make, get to work and work harder and earn more. It starts to become really, really simple.
I agree.
And
I take it back.
I at first
but
I'll tell you what, I at first was opposed to this when we first started this.
This conversation?
Yes. And my mind has changed
Did
right
I
here in front of your eyes.
Did I change your mind with my questions?
Yes, because it made me think about it in a different way. Because here's the thing. As soon as you said, well, wouldn't that do away with minimum wage, my initial reaction was no, it wouldn't, because they're separate. Because universal basic income is not a minimum wage. Because it has nothing to do with an hourly rate or anything like that.
Right, but then I explained myself a little bit.
But then you said, well, but the reason is
it
wouldn't have to have a minimum wage. And that's when and you didn't even go any further than that. And it hit me like, wow, that's true. Because if I'm earning $200 because that's what my area requires for me to live, because I live some middle of the country somewhere where cost of living is cheap, then guess what? Until I make $200 or more dollars, the government is subsidizing my income for a little while. But then the incentive is all they're going to give me is the basics. And so what that infers is you don't own a car.
Okay.
And you can't go on vacation. You got to take, if you can afford it, if you're lucky, a car service. Otherwise, you're taking the bus.
Whatever.
But I'm just saying, like, there's no frills. I want people to understand that. There's no frills. And that's the point, is...
So it pays for a roof over your head,
welfare,
and basic food
exactly.
for you to eat.
And the problem with a welfare type system is that it allows you to gyp the system, because, you only need X dollars to live, but because you played the system, you're getting X times 10.
Would people get additional income if they were to, say, have a baby? Be a single person with a baby?
I haven't thought of that far through.
I would guess yes, because technically their basic expenses are higher.
I would say there's a percentage that would go up, but nowhere near what it does right now.
No, like, I don't know what happens with welfare here, but I know that if you have a baby and you're on welfare in Canada, for your first baby, your income level for the month almost doubles.
Well, but see, here, be realistic. Be realistic. We quite literally spend half the time just the two of us, and half the time 4 of us. We quite literally double in size. Okay?
Yes.
And they're both old enough to eat the same amount of food we eat and drink the kind of stuff we drink. As far as volume goes, they're in that age. So it's not like they're children, babies, like infants, toddlers. They're actually adults that haven't quite made it to adulthood.
Hi everyone,
yet.
This is Mike,
They're adults,
and I truly hope you enjoyed this show.
And they have adult size.
You're able to subscribe to this show on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher so as to never miss an episode. If by chance you did miss an episode here or there, you can catch up on all shows, past and present, by heading over to yogispodcastnetwork.com/TNR show.
But the other expenses don't
Thanks
change.
for
The electricity
listening.
bill is the same. The rent is the
Right,
same.
that's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Thank you for correcting me. Because that's what I meant, is that they come here and yes, food
doubles
but,
and entertainment
electricity,
doubles, and that's
but
it.
electricity doesn't double.
Right.
Cell phone bill doesn't double.
Okay, so I have a question now.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned that it would be a different level based on where you live, which makes total sense because it's more expensive to live in Los Angeles than it is to live in Ohio, which I learned today. California is not the highest. Remember that screenshot that I sent you where it said the amount of money you need to buy a house?
Mm-hmm.
Ohio is the cheapest and Hawaii is the most expensive.
Most expensive, right.
And so you'd need a different amount of money if you're living in Hawaii versus living in Ohio.
Right.
I would assume that all living expenses are on the same kind of scale.
Mm-hmm.
But so would this universal basic income be run at the state level because the living expenses for a state are relatively static?
Yes.
Or it wouldn't be like...
because it should be a local law.
Somebody from Ohio making a buttload of money would never be paying into universal basic income for somebody in California.
Right, and I could be totally off base here, but think about how you explained to me how healthcare works in Canada. It's done province by province. Mm-hmm. And so if you moved from one province to another, there's a short period of time where technically you don't have local insurance.
You get a 90-day grace period. Like if you move from Alberta to BC, you get 90 days where your health coverage is still good in Alberta. So if you move to like a border town, you could just drive across. And then you have like a period of time where you have to apply for BC healthcare. And BC healthcare you have to pay a premium for, so then you'd have to pay.
But see, there you go. So there's differences.
It's a little,
but there's differences in how it works.
And it should be the same thing here. Because things that work for people in California obviously don't work for... Same things won't work for people who live in Ohio.
Exactly.
If your minimum universal basic income here needs to be like $35,000.
But here's the kicker, though. Okay, here's the kicker, because this is something that some people have tried to push, and I don't agree with this. People say, well, once you move to an area and you get something like that, you should be able to take it with you to another area. So if you haven't yet earned more than the basic income of California, you should be able to move to Mississippi out in the woods and get the same income. And I don't agree with that. And I don't agree with that because it's called basic income. And basic income is what you need to define as what you need in order to survive. And I'm going to add comfortably. And by comfortably, I don't mean like,
you're not starving.
Ooh, I have a huge cushion. I mean, you don't have any days where you go hungry.
Right.
That's, the key. And you got a roof over your head.
And you don't have to just eat ramen.
Yeah, no lavish things, but you know what? If you need to be able to have a hamburger for dinner tonight, you should be able to afford to have hamburger for dinner because another night you're going to offset maybe a little bit. Maybe you decide you want carne asada, so you spend a little bit more money on the meat. Well, next time you buy chicken, or you eat mac and cheese or something.
Right.
You have ways to make up and balance it. And I think that's what the key issue is that basic income has to be defined. What is basic income? Because then that's how, if you work and focus on that definition of basic income, you can't have abuses to the system. Because it is what it is. You all live in this area. I don't care that you have 4 kids and they have 3. We've determined that that's only a 0.2% chance of a difference. So that's all you're getting. And since that only amounts to a penny, we're not adding it to your money. Well, yeah, and that's the point. There's a formula. And there wouldn't be any, oh, please, give us this much more. I mean, you gave us 300 for the first 2, so why did you only give me 100 for the last 2? Well, because that's what the formula said to do.
Well, and then
arguing about
that amount would get less and less with how many children you have, because they're no longer, well, I guess you might have to move up a house size, but...
All depends. I would say there would be cutoffs where it's a graduated scale. So the more kids you have, it goes down lower and lower and lower. Then it hits a point where
it takes a little increase and then keeps going lower and lower.
And
my guess is they would have to follow a minimum people per room.
And then it takes a jump up to a little bit more expensive.
It would be very complicated to set up.
Yes, it would, but you'd have to define it. Because if you didn't define it, it would be left open to abuse.
Unless you legitimately did it per person. And then children would be granted a small amount of universal basic income.
Well, yeah, and that would be the best way to not get cheated. Because, like, one of the things that I've heard, I don't know that people do this for sure, and I can't in this day and age even see how it's possible, but people used to, like when I was younger, I'd hear stories about, oh, the family has a dog and 3 cats. Well, guess what? That means they have 6 kids, not 2. And they register the dog and the cats with a human name.
But I feel like pets are a luxury.
But I'm saying they register them as though they're human children.
That's asinine.
Human children. They don't say, these are my pets who just happen to be my children. They say, oh, that's Piper. He's my son. He's my newborn son.
You did not birth that.
That's Priscilla.
Or if it's not the same.
She's my 2-year-old daughter. You get the point? Like,
yes. They
make it up. And that's how they're gaming the system. But with your suggestion of tying it to the individual, well, Pretty Girl doesn't have an account with the government and never will. She wouldn't qualify.
Do children here get registered for a social security number at birth?
At birth.
Interesting. Then it'd be perfect. If you have a social security number.
Yeah, we're going to give you this, and it starts at when you're 18.
Yeah. And then I would guess there'd be.
And honestly, you could change it in order to make sure that it's totally fair. You could actually change it to the same way that child support is done. Either when they're 18 or when they graduate high school.
Right, because you get a whole lot of high school students that are.
Well, and also if there's some that are like 18 and they don't graduate until June,
right.
Well, they should still get. They shouldn't get their universal basic income yet because they're probably still living at home with mom.
But at the same point, then it shouldn't be 18 at all. It should be graduating high school.
Yes.
I went to college when I was 17.
Yeah. No, you're right about that. You're absolutely right about that. That was my original comment earlier.
Yeah.
That was my original comment earlier, and you interjected that it should be an adult, and I was like, interesting, maybe. But you're right, actually. But actually, it's true. The kid who graduates early. I mean, what about kids who make it out of high school at 16? They're going out into the world. They're going to have to be able to take care of their own needs. They should get it.
So then it should be, well, because you're not required to graduate high school, are you? You're only required to go to school till you're like 16 here.
Right.
So then perhaps it should be day you graduate high school or 18th birthday, whichever comes second.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't even work though, because that would still fuck over the 17-year-olds going to college.
Well, I think the whole just graduating high school is the key. That's it. That's the decision point. The day you graduate high school, that next day, you're eligible for the UBI.
And if you don't graduate high school, then when you turn 18.
Yeah.
Interesting. That fixes the problem.
Yeah. Because the only people that would be having to wait till they're 18 is the people who drop out of high school.
Which,
and here's
then
the
you're
thing.
Making your own choice.
And here's the thing. Yeah, you're making your own choice. I'll just wait until I'm 18 to get that money, and I'll drop out now. Because you could have stuck it out. I mean, notice we didn't say they had to pass all the classes. We just said they had to graduate. That just means they have to meet the requirements to graduate. That doesn't mean you got to get an A+ on everything or a 4.0 average.
No.
It's not like a scholarship. It's here you go. You're moving on into life.
Right.
And it's interesting because it's kind of a socialist type approach, but by fixing some of the holes that socialism itself has.
It would do what we always say the government doesn't bother to do. The government right now takes a very broken system, for example, welfare, and they just put Band-Aids on it and some duct tape over here and then some super glue up here and then maybe a big old Band-Aid on that and then
some lipstick.
It's peeling, so add some more duct tape over here. Like, why don't you just take this broken fucking thing? And I know this is a very millennial way to look at the world, so take the super broken thing and rather than trying to put more Band-Aids on it, put it in the trash and get a new thing. And the reason I say that's a very millennial thing to say is because my grandpa would be extremely offended that I just said that. My grandma had a measuring cup and the handle snapped off, and he invented a new type of glue to put it back together because he didn't want to buy a new one. My mom still has said measuring cup. It's really gross.
I don't know how I feel about that comment, though. Because what the lazy programmers do in the programming world is they get assigned a task that's maybe partially written, or it's written and it works in a way, but they want it to work in a different way. And that person just trashes all that code and writes their own code from scratch. Now, they're lazy and they're also thieves, if you ask me, because had they done it the way they're supposed to do, the way the conscientious developer does it, they would have fixed the problems and integrated the changes into what was already there. That would have taken 40% of the time they ultimately build. So if they build you 10,000, they could have built you 6,000
but I think that's
done
different.
The same work.
And the reason I think that's different is because they're taking something that's incomplete and throwing it away because they're lazy. They're not taking something that's broken beyond repair and throwing it away because they desperately need a new one.
Well, give me an example of something that's broken beyond repair and you need a new one. Like, I'm getting what you're saying, but I need an example.
A vehicle that has been in a fiery car crash. You cannot fix that.
Who would ever think you could?
Exactly. Well, who thinks they can fix some of the government systems that are going on?
But that's not... You still haven't given me an example.
Yes, I have. It's something that you cannot fix. You need to throw it away and get a new one.
Well, like, what's an example of a government thing that's broken that you can't fix that you should throw away and get a new one of? Welfare. Okay, and I'm not saying I disagree. I'm delving into this. What makes welfare the first thing that pops into your head then?
Because it's what we were already talking about.
Okay, that's why?
I'm sure
it's not because... I'll tell you why it would be the first pop in my mind. Because it's the one I've heard the most abusive things about on both sides. Like the woman that I dated that had the disease, okay? Mm-hmm. Her mom got paid a caretaker's payment for her for having her in the house. So even though the sister would continually threaten, allegedly, to charge her rent, she knew that wouldn't happen because she went in 50-50 partners with her mom. And the reason that they were able to do it is that the mom was nice and being the typical parent and going, you know what? There's $10,000 going in here. She's only going to pay $2,000. I'll pay $8,000. But I'm going to give her 50-50 ownership. Mm-hmm. Just to appease her and make her feel good. So she threatened to give... She would act like she owned half, but she would prove every time that she knew she really didn't, because she would threaten to charge rent, but she knew that if she charged rent, her mom would lose the caretaker money, and then the caretaker money was what made it so her mom could give her the extra 30%.
To name a few other government policies now that I've had.
But that's a good one. That's a good one. I think it's the most abused system.
Medicare.
Why is Medicare a problem?
It's broken.
Why, though?
Because people are abusing it the same way they're abusing the welfare, and it's the same.
But it's abused on the provider side, not the user side.
It's broken. It's abused in place.
Obamacare has always been broken
It's
because
broken.
that was a socialistic idea that wasn't going to ever work.
Gun laws? Drug laws?
Gun laws, there's way too many loopholes.
But
Gun laws, there's way too many things that are illegal for adults.
We've talked about it. It's just what currently exists is broken, and the Democrats think that they're going to put a Band-Aid on it to stop school shootings, and it hasn't, and it's not going to.
Okay.
It's broken.
Hold on a second. Let me make a correction in something that I said now that you've shed more light on the situation. The lazy programmer does just say, I'm going to throw this out. Okay? But even the good programmer is going to be brought into a situation where they're going to be told, okay, well, we have this system and it does this, and we need it to do this. And that good programmer is going to take that job because that doesn't sound that difficult. Only to find out that 15 other programmers were presented with 15 other scenarios, and they have now patchworked together 15 other development teams' work. And now you're supposed to do it, and you're like, do you know that it would take me 400 hours just to read the code to understand what's going on? And then I start working for you and it's going to cost another 400 hours? Or we could throw this in the trash and I could charge you 600 hours and be done with it.
There's your example.
Yeah,
in your words of something that is so broken that it's not worth fixing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it gets to the point where trying to read through the bureaucratic bullshit takes longer than the actual process itself.
And I used the example of my grandpa because he spent 40 hours inventing this new glue when he could have spent, and he probably spent more than $1 inventing this new glue when it was a $1 measuring cup from the dollar store that he had to fix.
But see, here's the thing. That sounds like sentimental value to me.
It is, of course it is, but it's my example.
But that sounds like sentimental value to me. But here's the thing. With a universal basic income, there'd be no reason for anybody to be homeless.
Right. Which means it would also...
Because don't forget...
replace all of the affordable housing problems.
Because don't forget, the landlords would be also given a universal basic income for the situation that they're in. So the landlords wouldn't have to charge $1,900 a month for a one-bedroom.
Prices would go down.
Prices would come down. And then people
therefore
wouldn't
the
have
amount
to
of
be...
universal income needed would go down.
Right. And so people wouldn't need as much money. And the whole goal would always be to transition everybody at some point in their life to the private sector. Because the theory of how it would normally work. Now, of course, there's going to be people who are going to get seriously injured. They're going to have to go on disability or whatever. That's going to happen, okay?
There are people in the world who just cannot.
But that happens a lot.
Understand this.
That happens a lot more right now. Like almost everybody ends up on public assistance at the end of their life. Almost everybody.
Right.
Okay? And that's something to be avoided. Because it's, number one, it's not going to take as good care of you as it should. And you're going to suffer big time. And number two, you're raping other people's money. Like, it's not your money. You should have a basic amount that you're allowed to have. And if you can earn more than that, lovely. That's called incentive. And that's the reason the welfare system is broken, is there is no incentive. And in fact, if I can figure out a way, not saying I would ever do this, but if I was to be able to figure out a way to give her a name and a fake birth certificate and try to make her a kid, that's why I say I don't understand how people would do that today. Wouldn't the computers pick that up in like seconds?
When you file your income tax, you have to have the social security number of the offspring you were claiming.
Every child.
Is that not required for welfare?
Well, yeah, but they get fake ones. Back when there was paper. And that's why I'm saying, now that it's not just paper and it's all interlinked computer files, I would think that they can't really create a kid that doesn't exist. Now, could they create a disability that doesn't exist?
Well,
people do that all the time.
And they could still have additional children to get additional welfare. That is what it is. And
all those things can happen. Yeah.
That wouldn't go away with the new system.
No, it wouldn't.
But that is what it is.
But because you're only attempting to meet basic needs, you're not going to give out as much money. And like I said, it gets to a point in time where the vast majority of the public is being paid out their basic income from the private sector.
Right.
Because even here's the thing. If you were paying me $1,100 a week and my basic income was $300 a week and I only really earned $100 a week in pension, you're still forced by law to pay me the basic income of $300
and so
in the private sector.
The people working that are making their $1,100 a month are being taxed by the government
to pay for this.
And that tax money is going back to pay. I see.
Right.
Well, it's kind of a pay it forward thing. You got helped out when you were in college, and now you're paying it forward to help somebody else out while they're in college.
Exactly.
And my guess is if you looked at the amount that you could make it so that you, specifically you, got your universal basic income for this amount of years, and you're a typical adult, and you did all the typical adult things, and now the money you put back in should be exactly enough to pay for another typical adult going through the exact same kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and you know how, like, this is another thing that would get fixed. You know how, like, on child support orders, you have to put down your income and expenses, and if anyone is helping with the income and expenses, well, you wouldn't be able to lie and say no to that anymore if actually the answer was yes.
Because
they would have a record.
The house.
Right, there'd be a record of who lived there. They would all have their own interaction with the government, and that problem would be fixed.
And even if you decided to lie and say the person living with you wasn't working, they would have a basic income level to assign to that person.
Yeah. So no matter what, they wouldn't ever have to, quote, leech off the system, end quote.
So now you can take your feist about how you didn't think this was going to be a good topic, and it's gone, because this is the longest podcast we've done in a long time.
Well, I just remember thinking, that's kind of dumb. Why did I put that in the list?
Now you know why.
Well, it turned out good. Like I said, I feel very political after those libertarian meetups.
I see.
Especially when I get to talk to David or George, because I think they're both very intelligent people.
It is a hot-ass sauna in our house right now.
It's not so hot.
You're a liar.
Feels good.
Don't lie to the people.
I like
the dogs are both on their back with all their feet as far away from their body as they can get.
Dog. What are you up to, buddy? He's upside down. He's cute when he's
and the tiny one is sleepwolfing.
That's cute.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's her hint that she's done.
I just can't sit here without the fans on anymore. Good night, everyone.
Hasta la bye-bye.